Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our next iteration of Chats with Charlie. I'm Michelle. I am a consular officer with the Bureau of Consular Affairs, representing at TravelGov. We're here to talk today about the June Visa Bulletin, and we are very fortunate again to have with us our visa expert, Charlie Oppenheim. Many of you are very familiar with Charlie's expertise. He has been with the State Department since 1978 and has been the chief of the Immigrant Visa Control and Reporting Division in the Office of Domestic Operations since 1998. The division's main responsibility is the administration of the annual numerical limits on immigrants, subdivided by preference, category, and country as provided for by the Immigration and Nationality Act. This division then publishes the Visa Bulletin, which summarizes the availability of visa numbers for the coming month, as well as providing other visa-related information. Thanks again for joining us today, Charlie.
It's my pleasure, as always.
Thanks. Before we get started, I just want to remind the audience that the event is live streaming and will be recorded and will be posted. So if the time is not convenient for everyone, we'll have the video online and we'll be taking questions during the event and after the fact. This event is intended to address issues of general interest related to visa, the content of the Visa Bulletin, and unfortunately, we cannot take questions related to non-immigrant visas, policy cases, or specific questions. However, I do want to mention that we are tomorrow, Tuesday, May 25th at 1 p.m. Standard Time, we are going to be hosting a different YouTube Live related to the visa backlog. We know many of you have questions about the visa backlog and how the State Department is prioritizing visa cases. So this would be a great event to dial into if you have specific interest in that. Another reminder, if you have questions about how embassies and consulates are prioritizing visa cases, you can see if you visit the visa section on travel.state.gov, there's specific information about how we are prioritizing cases, both on the immigrant visa and non-immigrant visa side. And you can also check the website of the embassy or consulate where you are applying for that even more specific information. So getting back to today's event, please post your questions in the comments during the live event. And then if you have questions after the fact, if you're watching this after it's already ended, you can put comments there as well. If we can't get to your question today, we'll answer them after the broadcast. And we did receive about 8 to 10 questions. We typically answer 8 to 10 advanced questions. Those are questions that we receive ahead of time that are the most popular and seem to have most interest. If you feel that you have a question that would be important for others to know, you can go ahead and email that question advance of the next event, which will be next month. And the instructions on how to do that, the email address, are all in the Visa Bulletin. So it's at the very end of the Visa Bulletin, and you can just email that address directly. So without further ado, we'll get right to it. Charlie, our first question is, do you expect that the FY 2021 family-sponsored and employment-based annual limits will be reached?
Of the probably 400 to 500 advanced questions which we did receive, this was the number one question. And no, we do not believe that, based on the implications of the COVID-19 situation and other issues which have impacted processing since October, we do not expect that those limits will be reached. The processing of cases at our overseas posts has resumed in recent months, but we're still not at the normal processing levels. And my guess is that the USCIS offices are facing the same processing issues.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I'm sure another popular question, because it's on this list, is what do you expect that the fiscal year 2022 family-sponsored and employment-based annual limits will be?
Under the current INA guidelines, we expect that the family-sponsored annual limit will once again be 226,000. It has been that way since about fiscal 2000. And for the employment-based limit, I now expect that the limit will be at least 290,000 for fiscal 2022. That will be another all-time high in terms of the employment limit.
Okay. And do you expect that China and the India employment second preference dates will continue to advance?
Yes, we will continue to advance those dates and most other employment dates as well, with probable exception of the employment fifth preference category for China, but all other employment dates will be moved aggressively through the end of the summer and most likely in the early part of fiscal 2022 as well.
Okay.
Again, based on the expected exceedingly high annual limit for 2022.
Okay. And then do you expect that the worldwide family preference dates will continue to advance through September as well?
Originally, we had expected the movement of the family dates to have slowed or stopped for the summer months. But based on changing conditions at our overseas posts, which are allowing additional numbers to be utilized, there is an excellent chance that we will be able to continue advancing many of the family dates through the summer.
Okay. Which countries typically use the majority of the employment-based visa numbers, would you say?
The China and India typically use the vast majority of the employment numbers. The reason being these applicants have the earliest priority dates. And also, if there are otherwise numbers available under the annual limits, those otherwise unused numbers can be made available strictly in priority date order to the applicants with the earliest dates. Again, those being typically China, most likely India, particularly in the India employment second and third preference categories.
Okay. And how are the financial action dates determined for each month?
We consider a number of variables when making the determination of the dates based on preference category annual limits. For example, the overall per country limits and category limits. We determine how many numbers have already been used, how many additional numbers we expect to be used during the current month, and the amount of known demand for which number use might be required based on the movement of the final action dates for the upcoming month. Okay. So those are just a few of the variables that are involved. There's a number of others, but those are kind of the highlights.
Great. Just a few more questions, advanced questions, and just a reminder to everyone to please go ahead and put your questions in the comment section if you have something related to the Visa Bulletin. So the next question is, does USCIS share information with your office regarding the amount of cases they have in various stages of processing?
Yes, we're very lucky. One, the USCIS Ombudsman's Office hosts a monthly meeting at which State Department, USCIS offices, and sometimes other government agencies are on the call or the in-person meeting in earlier times. We discuss the number situations, and at the beginning of each month, USCIS provides us with a very detailed report indicating the amount of demand they have, which is in various stages of processing in the various categories. We use that information in the determination of the final action dates, knowing that such demand could require the use of a number during that upcoming month. For example, at the beginning of May, I received the report. I was able to look at that and based on the information there, determine what the June employment dates should be based on the likelihood numbers would be used during June.
Okay. And then at what point is a number allocated for use by an applicant based on the determination of the monthly final action dates?
If the applicant has already been reported to our office as being documentarily qualified, meaning they've submitted all of the required documents that are normally required at the time of visa interview, and their priority date is within the newly announced final action date, then numbers are immediately allocated for potential final action on their case. Then throughout that month and the upcoming month, numbers are continually allocated as new cases can be finalized because all of the required processing on them have also been received and finalized. For example, I believe one of the questions last month was about the USCIS offices requesting additional information on the case. For example, a new medical, et cetera. Well, that new medical is received, and then immigration would then, once it's received, they could request an additional number for use by that applicant.
Okay, that's good to know. And do you expect any of the final action dates to be retrogressed?
No, we do not expect any of the family-sponsored or employment-based final action dates to be retrogressed, either in fiscal 2021 or for the foreseeable future in fiscal 2022.
Okay, and what about diversity visas? Do you expect any of the DV 2021 rank cutoffs to be retrogressed?
No, all of the DV rank cutoffs will remain current through the end of the DV 2021 program. One other additional comment in terms of final action dates as we move forward. We do expect that many of the family-sponsored final action dates will be held for an extended period of time once our overseas posts do return to completely normal operating status, most likely sometime in next year that when they'd be held. And the reason being that the dates which have already been established that will provide sufficient demand to probably utilize the vast majority of the 2022 numbers, at least for the first half of the year, okay. Potentially moving forward into the second half again. So in terms of family movement of dates, they are likely to stop once overseas processing resumes full operational status.
Okay, great to know. So we have a lot of questions coming in, so we'll go ahead and get straight into those. So our first question is from Sandeep. It says, hi, Charlie, do you anticipate EB2/EB3 with a September 2011 priority date will retrogress in fiscal year 2022?
No.
Yeah.
We do not believe that'll happen. Again, with the anticipated high limit for 2022, I think that everybody can assume that all of the employment dates will continue to be advanced at a very aggressive pace, at least for the first half of the year. Then depending on the amount of new filings and processing rates, things may slow down or have to be held at some point during the second half of fiscal 2022.
Got it. Okay, our next question is from, and I apologize, hopefully I'm saying this correctly, Purna Praga. How much movement can we see with EB3 in the July bulletin?
Once again, it will be very aggressive. I think it's safe to say that most, if not all, of the application filing dates, which are listed for employment in the chart B of the bulletin, with the exception of China EB5, will be reached by the end of the year. So again, expect very aggressive movement of the employment dates for the month of July.
Okay, I'm sure some people will be happy to hear that. Our next question is it says F4 went on retro last year in January 2020. Until now, it hasn't come up to the same month, which was already 2021. Sorry, it was already February 7th, 2021.
The family fourth preference has never reached 2021.
Okay.
So I'm not sure the person submitting the question is on the fourth preference. The date did retrogress in fiscal 2020. The reason being, throughout fiscal 2019, the response rate by applicants who had been requested to assemble and submit required documentation was extremely low. So the worldwide family fourth preference date had been advanced at a very rapid pace to try to maximize number use under the family sponsored fourth preference. Then eventually the response rate did start picking up. and therefore we had to retrogress it because the amount of available numbers was insufficient to meet the new demand. And we've been slowly recovering from that retrogression during the course of the last year and a half.
Okay, got it. Our next question is, when can we expect 2016 March EB3 to be current?
With that, I'm guessing they're speaking of India third preference. If looking, because worldwide third preference is already current. Okay. And China third preference is in 2018, with the India third preference date being in 2011. I think that the India third preference date is likely to advance into 2012 in the near future. Beyond that, we will have to continue to watch incoming demand. Okay.
And just a reminder to our viewers, if you have a question about a specific country, please list that in your question, just so it's clear. Our next question is from Shujal. Is there any chance in the spillover from FB for FY 2021 to EB in FY 2022 from the last prediction of 135,000? Is it still that same prediction?
Yes, my prediction, as I mentioned earlier, I expect that the fall across under the INA guidelines of unused family numbers, which are automatically added to the employment annual limit for the following year, I believe that will result in the fiscal 2022 employment-based limit being at least 290,000.
Okay. We have another question from Kavita. It says, hi, Charlie. How is your work audited for the way you move Visa Bulletin dates? If all the data is carefully hidden under a few months later, it took USCIS 113 days to publish Q1 results.
Over the years, there have been internal, we monitor the number use and the dates constantly. Immigration looks at it as well. And over the years, the OIG has also looked at the methodology, et cetera, in the past and been satisfied with the results of their studies as well.
Okay.
And basically, everything that is done with the movement of the dates is done in an effort to comply with the Immigration and Nationality Act guidelines. They're pretty cut and dried, saying what should be done. For example, the preference limits, the per country limits, how otherwise unused numbers may be allotted, etc. So it's fairly easy to, we just follow those guidelines.
Yeah, so a lot of checks and balances, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, our next question is, hi, Charlie. What is the point of advancing Indian EB2 filing dates as USCIS refused to accept adjustment of status filing for the month of June 2021?
We have, State Department has no jurisdiction over what they may choose to do, but we continue to advance the application filing dates because that allows our National Visa Center to contact the eligible applicants based on the movement and ask them to begin assembling and submit the required documentation. That is an excellent way for me to gain much needed visibility into potential demand when and if I were to move the final action dates. And the Immigration Service has a formula which they use to decide whether only the final action dates or a combination of the final action and application filing dates will be allowed to be used. I would suggest that listeners carefully monitor the USCIS website, which provides that information on whether the application dates will be able to be used for the upcoming months. And at this point, I fully believe that the dates which are announced in the October Visa Bulletin for application filing dates, I fully expect those to be allowed to be used for filing. That has been the standard policy in recent years.
Okay, great. So another question is, shouldn't the spillover go specifically to India since it's the most backlogged?
No, what the spillover is, we are currently estimating that there will be approximately 150,000 unused family-sponsored numbers. Those 150,000 numbers get added to the 140,000 minimum employment-based annual limit, resulting in the 290 figure. Then the Immigration and Nationality Act guidelines, which indicate that in the first employment, first, second, and third preference categories, those preference categories are entitled to 28.6% of the annual limit, and the fourth and fifth preference are entitled to 7.1% of those annual limits. Then there is also a 7% per country annual limit, which is applied to that 290,000 figure. And once that per country limit is established, then once again, those 28.6 and the 7.1% limits are imposed to the availability of numbers within an individual country.
Okay.
So again, the Immigration and Nationality Act guidelines imposing the 7% annual limit, the intent is to prevent a handful of countries from potentially monopolizing all of the available numbers, giving an equal chance at applicants around the world to have use of the numbers. And then if the numbers are not being used in the various employment categories, then they can be those, quote, otherwise unused numbers under the annual limit can be provided to the countries which have applicants with the earliest priority dates.
Great, thanks for that clarification. I'm sure that's helpful for those watching. Another question from Mital is, why is the difference between filing date and final action date in the India F4, why is that only 6 months? And when in other categories, the difference is between 9 to 12 months?
With the application filing dates, they are established at a point where we believe the final action date is likely to reach within the next 8 to 12 months. The amount of applicants in the India Family Fourth Preference category, which have applied and submitted all the required documentation, is sufficient within that roughly 6-month period to utilize all the numbers we believe will be available in the near future. Once that level of demand starts to be diminished, then the application filing date for India Fourth Preference would be advanced. And those dates are established and advanced depending on the various preference categories.
Okay, thanks. And does the State Department have authority to make all priority dates current if USCIS does not use the employment-based visas available this year? For example, the 262,000 for FY 2021.
The way the final action dates are determined, we have a number use target for a given month. We compare that target with the amount of numbers available and the demand. So we look carefully at the amount of demand which potentially could utilize the available numbers. If there is not sufficient demand that we can see, then a category, for example, in the worldwide employment third preference category, that is currently deemed to be current because the level of demand that we have on file at this moment is not sufficient to fully utilize all the available numbers. But if demand, we were able to see the demand was there, we might have to establish a final action date.
Okay, great. Our next question is from Nikolai. Why did you move the family first preference filing dates aggressively? And are you planning to move the priority dates aggressively?
With the application filing dates on the family categories, family first preference, once again, we wanted to stimulate applicant responses so that we could generate sufficient demand to fully utilize the available numbers. The advancement of the family first preference final action date has also been done in a manner to allow enough applicants to be ready to go and potentially use all of the available numbers under that limit. The first preference annual limit is to 23,400. So by the end of the year, we want to have a date which would generate enough demand to allow all those numbers to be utilized.
Okay. It looks like we're getting a lot of questions about, really targeted at USCIS, and a reminder that, if you have questions, you can always visit uscis.gov for specific questions to them. We are the State Department, and so we kind of stick in our lane and try to answer what we can. But so we'll move on to our next question, which is, out of 262,000 visas which were available to employment immigration, how many visas have already been used, and how many visas can be expected to be used by the end of this fiscal year?
We do not publish mid-year figures or discuss that. In terms of number use, I do believe both on the family and employment side, there will be significant amounts of unused numbers under the annual limit. We are hoping that proves not to be the case through continuing efforts to utilize visa numbers. For example, during the summer months of 2020, last summer, we did not expect the employment annual limit to be reached then, yet the extraordinary efforts of USCIS in terms of being able to process cases during the summer months allowed the vast majority of the employment numbers to actually be utilized. So we continually monitor the situation. And again, the aggressive movement of the employment dates have been done in a manner to potentially maximize number use by making numbers available to qualified applicants.
Great. Our next question comes from Huzaifa. When do you expect F3 final action for the rest of the world will have a strong forward movement?
Again, in the family third preference, as I mentioned earlier, the dates have already been advanced at an aggressive pace to maximize potential number use under this year's annual limits. Therefore, to the extent we're not able to utilize those numbers, we will already have them, quote, on hand, ready to go as we move into fiscal 2022. That is the reason I believe that at some point, the family-sponsored dates in many or most preference categories are likely to be held for an extended period of time, because we will already have enough applicants, quote, queued up, ready to go based on the existing dates, and therefore we do not need to continue to advance those dates.
Okay. And what is the reasoning for progressing the EB2 India data filing dates, especially since the data filing table cannot be used?
As mentioned earlier, we advanced the application filing dates to allow our National Visa Center to notify applicants who have petitions on file with them for processing abroad to begin assembling the required documents, so that I will have visibility into such demand in the future, and that those applicants then are potentially ready to be scheduled based on the movement of the final action date at some future point. Again, this is to gin up the demand for visibility on our side, and the Immigration Service has a different policy for determining when they will allow those application filing dates to be utilized. Okay.
That's a good segue to a different question, which is from Leo, who asks, when you say aggressive, what does that exactly mean to you? Are you talking 12 months, 15 months, 9 months?
I would say, for use an example in the India second preference, for the previous 2 fiscal years, often the India employment second preference date was moving by a matter of days up to a week, maybe 2 weeks in a month. Our aggressive movement in recent months has been 3 to 5 to 8 months at a time. Okay. So therefore, again, the aggressive movement is made in an effort to make sufficient numbers available to fully utilize the annual limits. At this point, all of the employment first preference categories are current, meaning there's sufficient demand for all applicants. Additional numbers which will not be required in the first can fall down and be utilized in the employment second preference category. And that is allowing both the China and India dates to be moving at a very rapid pace.
Okay, thanks. Just a reminder, I know we're getting a lot of questions. We'll take a couple more and then we'll have to sign off. But again, we will answer the questions as they continue to come in. And so we had a question from Sudepthi. It says, hi, Charlie. May I know in which order the applications are processed? Is it based on priority date or receive date or notice date?
Could you repeat that once again?
Yeah, sure. The question is what order applications are processed in, if it's based on priority date, the date the applications are received, or notice date.
It would be, I cannot speak to the USCIS processing, but from at the State Department, it's based on when the applicants become documentarily qualified, meaning they've submitted all the required requested documents to our National Visa Center, and then have been reported to the visa office for consideration. The cases will be processed in that order that they were originally provided to the visa office. So.
Great. And the cases that I guess the visa is a KCC, those cases, how are they prioritized once?
The same process. The Kentucky Consular Center, KCC, handles all of the documents that are submitted for overseas processing of diversity visa categories. Once again, they would be processing in the order that the cases became documentarily qualified. So it is my understanding that for both the family and employment cases and the diversity cases, a case that was submitted in October would be scheduled for interview before a case that only was became qualified and reported to the visa office in March. So again, we're taking the cases in the order that people became ready, be it for not for the the issues with COVID and the post-processing limitations.
Got it. Okay. And so we'll take our last two questions. One of the last two is from Iman Sukumar. Do you believe that India EB3 from 2013 will be current in 2022?
I do believe that a India 2013 priority date will be reached in fiscal 2022.
Okay.
Again, if you look at the application filing dates, which are listed in the June Visa Bulletin for the employment categories, with the exception of employment fifth preference, China, I believe all of the other application dates will be reached by the final action date by September. And one example is for Vietnam employment fifth preference, there is no application filing date. I believe there is an excellent chance the Vietnam employment fifth preference category will become current by September.
Okay. And then our last question is from John. In our last monthly chat, I think you had indicated that dates for processing immigrant visas for the F4 category were going to move. However, those dates didn't move this month. Do you know why?
The worldwide family fourth preference date for the month of June did advance. I don't have the sheet with the May date, but I believe that the worldwide fourth preference date advanced 2 to 3 weeks for the month of June.
Okay. So yeah, that's a good reminder too for those that are not as familiar with the Visa Bulletin. It can also be found on travel.state.gov. You can always take a look and those numbers are right there. I want to thank again everyone for joining us, whatever time it is, wherever you're calling from or listening in from. Please continue to put questions in the comments section, and we will come back and answer them when possible. Again, we can only answer general questions regarding the State Department's role in immigration visa policy. However, USCIS questions should go directly to them. And huge thanks to Charlie for always joining us. It's your expertise is invaluable, and we're always happy to chat with you. So we will see you all in another month once the next Visa Bulletin comes out. And thanks again to our special guest, Charlie. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.